Hello, and welcome to a lot. That's with two T's of help with James Lott Jr. Who am I? I'm James Lott Jr. Here on JLJ Media, giving you all kinds of help. What we try to do here, pass on knowledge and experience. And today, folks, time to put on your adulting caps. Yes, I know adulting is hard. I've been an adult for 30. Well, as in a month from today, when it's my birthday, it'll be 36 years I've been an adult.
Oh, well,
I
happy
understand.
early birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't believe I made it that far, but adulting is hard, folks. So I understand. But it is that time of the year. No, I don't mean spring or almost summer. It's time for taxes for many of us. It's time for the average person. It's time for tax season. And as that comes up on April 17th, and stuff. But before you get to your taxes, it's like, are you budgeting? Or you have budgets going on? Do you know what your money's doing? Do you know what you have? Do you know how to check it all out? Well, I have someone with me who's going to talk to me and talk to you about that. And she's all about adulting in the real world. It's actually that's your thing. It's a multimedia interactive coaching academy founded by my guest. And the first e-course was launched in September of last year. And she says she's here, I quote, seeks to set young adults up for success with their finances, healthcare, interpersonal communication, living on their own, of course, and other life skills. It is very important. A lot of schools don't share that stuff anymore. Um, the Adulting in the Real World is a coaching service. So we'll tell you where to find all that and everything. But help me welcome Alyssa Mairanz. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. First of all, how are you today? How's everything going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. So I want everybody to know that I dress just regular because we're adults. I don't want to get all super dressed up or anything because it's not. I want that this is relatable. This is stuff for everybody out there, all walks of life, all classes, all everything. But for most of us who are out there, especially if you're young, getting out there trying to handle your bills, tax season's coming up, and you're like, what do I do? What do I do? Or am I doing it
hmm
right? Or am I doing it wrong? So how's adulting been for you, Alyssa, yourself?
Yeah, adulting has been a hard journey. I'm now in my mid 30s. And I found figuring things out really tough. I had parents who taught me how to be independent, but also very abruptly were like, "You're an adult, go figure life out." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much. This is great. I love this abrupt transition." um, but I put a lot of time and energy into figuring that out, and I often help my friends who are also in their mid 30s. And I was like, you know what? How can I help people figure this out at a younger age? So that you come into your 20s even already feeling like, all right, I know what I'm doing. And I can figure out all this stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a new world because you're coming out there on your own, and even in your 30s, it's still a new world. You're still like
hmm
going, okay, now you're dealing with other things you just no one talks about and no one really shares with. Every stage of your life is something. I mean, you're in my 50s, I understand things are new, but yeah, 20s and 30s, it's a really new, and you're learning about what jobs really mean, how that works in your life. You're learning
Yeah.
about rents or home ownership in some cases, young and children in some cases, or just being single with roommates. I mean, it's a whole thing, isn't it? It's a
hmm
whole big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, lots to navigate.
Yes. Well, first, I want to start with the basics, which is when you say the word budget, it means some people don't know what that means in some cases, but a lot of people just think of all these, they think of work or this, but there is home budgeting, there is interpersonal budgeting. Let's start with there. What is a budget? Let's just start with that. What is a budget?
Yeah, a budget is just how you spend your money to make sure that you have enough money to cover expenses, and you're not going into negative funds. And just so everyone knows, as someone who math makes my head really, really hurt, you don't have to understand numbers to do this. That's also what I love about helping people with budgeting specifically, is I've learned how to figure that out without at all having a math brain.
Yeah,
Um,
very good. So that's budget, folks. You got that.
mhm.
Now the next step is um, I'm sure there's many ways to approach. Well, you guys have your approach for adulting in the real world. We want folks to come to your coaching service, but can you give us some kind of, there's a couple of top tips to mastering this kind of budget thing. What should people know in terms of like setting up a budget?
Yeah. So the first thing is you have to understand your income, right? And so a lot of people also get confused because you're told you get a salary or an hourly rate and you do some calculation, and then you forget about taxes, right? So the idea is you have to look at what we call our net income, which is what are you bringing in after taxes? So look at any jobs you may have, any extra income that's coming in on a regular basis, and say, okay, I have X money coming in. And some people like to be very exact with numbers. Some people estimate, you can do it either way, whatever works for you. I'm all about like, how can you budget in a way that works for you? Not how do you figure out how to budget the way I budget, because everyone's different. So that's the first step.
That makes
And
sense.
then
First of all, it makes sense. It's almost like anything else. I'm a life coach myself, so it's
Mhm.
anything. It's all first understanding you. That's like, I gotta understand what is going on there. So, but like really looking for real, looking at your finances for real. What are your assets? What are your liabilities? What do you have? What do you bring? What are you making? What are you taking home?
Mhm.
It's very important to look at all that stuff because you can't really lie to yourself. You can lie to yourself, but it comes out in the wash. So you,
Yeah, yeah.
you
I
want to be
remember actually just a funny story to illustrate this. When
please.
I got my first job at a grad school. So I feel like it was my first real job. I was finally living out of my parents' house. And I'm like, wow, I have some money. And I bought these really expensive concert tickets to go see Maroon 5. And then I
Oh,
got my first paycheck and I looked at it and I was like, this is where did my money go? And that's when I learned you really don't understand how much goes to taxes, and you want to keep track of what you're actually bringing in, versus what you look at if you have like the salary that's being offered to you.
yes.
Yes, big
Okay.
learning experience.
Very important. Yes, very big experience. Maroon 5's good. We like them. I have their albums. We like them.
Yes, yes, the concert was great, but I learned a valuable lesson.
Okay.
uh,
So another tip, another top tip.
Yeah, so then once you look at your income, you want to look at what are your expenses, which means what are you actually spending money on, right? So most people have typical expenses of rent, food, um, you know, any apartment or house supplies that you need to keep inventory of. You may have car expenses, which includes like insurance, gas, etc. Right? So you want to look at what you typically spend, and if you have no idea, pro tip, look at your bank and credit card statements. Make a list of where
Mhm.
you see where your money is going, and how much is going there. And I always like to say also what's really important is a lot of people hear budget and they get very stressed because it's like, well, I don't want money to rule my life. I want to also enjoy, especially if you're in your 20s and 30s, right? Like you're finally independent, you want to have fun. And so I think it's very important that you put in a fun expense. So
Very
you can
good.
call it luxuries, you can call it fun, you can have two separate ones, however you want to do it. I personally have a fun expense and a luxury expense. So for me, fun is like social, concerts, going out to
Yeah.
eat, things I do with my friends. And luxuries are like additional clothes or makeup or things like that that I may want to buy, right? So think of everyone has to think about for them what brings them joy and in a way that they have to spend money, and how can they allow themselves to have that ability without just counting pennies.
So it could be like for
Uh,
travel, like
yeah,
travel, special things like that, special outings. Yeah, that are above the norm of like having lunch with a friend. Well, I guess for some people that could be a luxury too, I guess. But I know what you mean. It's like there's kind of like the little things, and then there's
yeah. And I think that ends up making budgeting less stressful and, you know, just more realistic also. In reality, we're all going to spend on the things we want to, right? And if you try to pretend you don't, which I've tried in my early budgeting and was wondering why it wasn't working, we're not really going to cut costs in every area,
yeah, yeah.
right? Or I've spoken to a lot of people who like to have gym memberships and they're like, I don't know if I can afford this and I really can't give it up. It's like, well, when you look at your whole budget, if that's what's important to you, you can put that in and you look at where you cut that's not really going to take away from your, the luxuries and things you need and want in life.
Well, I tell people because again, I always say I was poor in my 20s. I was out there working. I went to college. I was poor, whatever. It was fun, a fun time. But people always say, "How'd you go on trips? How'd you do things?" I go, "There are things you have to really research. And now back then you didn't have computers. When I was that age, now you got computers where you actually go online, and there's always things going on in your neighborhood or your city that are for free or low cost that are
Hmm.
fun. There are also trips. There are sites. Got to make sure the sites are reputable, but there are sites, and there's ways to do things cheaper. I never spend lots and lots of money on trips, so there is a way to do it. Like you said, it's a way to just again be honest. Look what you have. You shouldn't go above your means. You should never go above your means. That just makes problems. Like, okay, well, if I don't get a Starbucks coffee, for 3 mornings, that possibly I can have lunch with a friend. I always kind of look
Hmm.
at it that way. So I hear you saying that kind of like, well, take a look around. What can you shave off that's not as important? Because what's important to you, you should do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And something also to in line with what you were saying is I am a big coffee person.
Me
And
too.
what I ended up doing is I put down money up front and I bought myself a really nice Nespresso machine. So even though it was an upfront cost, I ultimately saved money because what I pay per coffee pod is much cheaper than going to Starbucks or Dunkin' or any of these other coffee places and getting 1 to 2 coffees a day. So it's also important to look at that is that's my next tip is looking at how maybe you can put something up front that's going to save you money in the long term, right? So you don't want to get very tunnel visioned on just what's costing now. You can look at the big picture.
Get an air fryer, folks. That was my thing. An air fryer changed my life.
Hmm.
Changed my life, and really, it does help with cooking and everything. It changed because also it saves on other bills in my house because I'm not using the stove so much or this so much. It's in the air fryer. I'm not using the microwaves. I can say I like my fryer. I also got I got a floor freezer because I was saving food. I mean, I would make this food and I have
Hmm.
some for later, so that saves something. So I agree with you. Sometimes there are the upfront big things to do now, which in the long run will save you later.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
that is true.
And something I talk about in the Adulting in the Real World course in a little bit more detail is also picking the right credit card. If you do your research, and I talk about that in the course a little bit more, how to look at that, you
Yes.
can find a way to, you know, build points, right? So for me, I rarely spend on flights because I have a credit card that I rack up enough points that usually covers my flights. So, you also look at what do you want and what cards give you what points for, the things that you need. So you can also be kind of earning money in a way by spending.
Well, here's my tip, which goes off of your tip. And my friends laugh all the time, but I'm telling you, when it comes to my birthday, I get freebies, rewards programs. Same as you're
Hmm.
saying, the points. But even there's like almost every place has a reward. You said you want a card for free, a reward, not credit card, but I'd say rewards card. So when you go, sometimes you can get points on your credit card for using it, and then get points for actually buying one of their products. So like Farmer Boys, I get points all the time, or 7-Eleven
Hmm.
has points. Like I was saying, you can get double points and stuff, like I said, on your credit card and personally, they have you get freebies, and I'll use it on your birthdays. They use some for free, and I remember I financed one year. My friends just laughed because I had free breakfast, lunch, and dinner at all these different places because on the birthday they give you the big shebang. So
Right.
the rewards thing, she's right about that. Reward stuff, sign up for all that stuff. Even if it's free or part of a service, sign up for it because in the end, they can help you also.
Yeah.
Just want to keep
Pretty
that.
easy to do and you get benefits.
Yes. As California Pizza Kitchen, folks, right now, every time the Dodgers win, which is our LA team, they give you a free pizza.
Oh, nice.
Dodgers win all the time. So what I do is, speaking of budgeting, I get the free pizza. I may order a salad, which is not that expensive, and something to drink, and I have a free pizza. So
Awesome.
I just say I love this topic. I just love this topic so much because I was in my 20s and 30s. I had no parental help. I was on my own trying to
Hmm.
figure this stuff out, and no one was here talking to me about this stuff back then. I had to figure it out. Like you said, just had to figure it out. So you're doing a great service. I just want to make sure I say that.
Thank you. I try.
Yes, you're doing great. So are those all your just top tips for mastering a budget? Those are your top tips.
Yeah, I think that's a great foundation. And once you start with that, that's how you can get more nuanced in what works for you.
Okay, so just say you got a budget, you got stuff going on. Well, now it's tax season, so we got to start
Hmm.
applying next. We're doing step by step, folks. Again, her place tells you more in depth. We just give you kind of top tips. Now you're going into tax season, so there is one question that people always are just like, "What is what and what's what?" W-2 versus 1099. Can you explain to folks in my business a lot of 1099? I mean, so I want you to kind of explain that to folks, please.
Yeah, I remember being so confused when I was first in the job world and like, what is this? Yeah. So essentially, we always call ourselves employees, but from a legal standpoint with taxes, an employee is a W-2 worker, which means you are working for someone so they can, create certain guidelines and rules around what you're doing for them. And because of that, they're also taking half of your tax burden. So the employer covers 50% of your taxes and should be setting up your paycheck so that you have your taxes from their part and your part taken out automatically at each paycheck. And then a 1099, otherwise known as an independent contractor, technically means you work for yourself and you're contracting, meaning you're giving your services out to someone else for cost. So if you are a contractor 1099, you have a little bit more freedom in what you're doing, but also the key with taxes is you are not having your employer cover any of your taxes, and they're not automatically being taken out of your paycheck unless you set up your own estimates.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. That's good. Now, also on the line of that, if you go in, you get a job, and it's okay, it's W-2. Is there anything key you need to look at, make sure you have filled out correctly? And besides your name and stuff, but like, is there anything else in there you should make sure you have correctly on a W-2?
Yes. So for a W-2, you need to make sure that they give you the form to fill out for a W-2 worker, which the original form is your W-4, and your next what you send for taxes is your W-2. Yeah. And then you also get a withholdings form, which is an IT 2104 that might be specific for New York. I will say
I think come I-9s out here or something in LA.
Yeah, so that's something for New York. So you have to know for your state which is your tax withholding form, and that's usually where people mess up the most, is not understanding their withholding. So you want to read the instructions really carefully, and if you're unsure, many employers, if they have a human resources department, you can sit with someone there and they can help you. Or you can seek out help from a professional. A lot of banks, your bank might give you these free services. So you can definitely go in and ask if that's something that they can provide, just so you make sure you're covering all your bases. If not filled out correctly, that's when you owe a lot of money come tax season, which you want to avoid.
I was gonna say that's why I'm saying that's why I want you to bring that up, because I'm like, people fill out wrong and go, I thought I didn't withhold enough, or I kept too much, or they see like I'm getting more money back at first. I'm like, that sounds cute, but yeah, make sure
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad you said that. And for us self-employed or people who do 1099, in my business and entertainment, there's a lot of 1099s. It's a lot of we're contracting services to people. So what are some couple important things that we should keep in mind also when filling those out?
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're giving your employer, I guess not, who you're
Yeah.
contracting to, the W-9 form so that they can send you the proper information at tax season to show what they paid you. Because at the end of the day, what happens is when you're filing taxes, the government is looking to see that what you're reporting matches what they're reporting.
Yes.
That form happens to be a lot simpler than the W-2 forms. So again, just read very carefully. A lot of mistakes are made because people rush through. And then the other really key thing that as an employer I've learned, make sure to update your address. Give a new W-9 to an employer if your address changes. Otherwise, they're going to send the information to your old address and you're not going to get it, and it can create a lot of delays.
I have a question actually. During tax season, employers start sending out the forms to you what you made. I think usually around end of January start. When should you be worried if you haven't gotten your information from people? If you haven't gotten all your stuff, when should you be worried?
So I wouldn't say worried. I would say follow up by beginning of February so you don't get to the worried point. Usually things by mid-February, things are sent out. I know that's what I aim for in my business. And so yeah, you want to avoid being worried. And so if you follow up, they'll say, hey, we're sending it now. Or if there was a delay, you already catch it and you're able to start having them push it through.
So mid-February, folks, just remember that, because that's another question you will ask me too. And also, okay, so you have your budget, you have your forms, you know what you made last year, everybody, what they withheld, what they made last year. So now it's time to actually file. So we're not going to get to the weeds of filing, but what are the main forms again these days? Because if people ask, because I know there's like 1040s and 540s and this way, like what? So what are usually the main? If you don't have like wild and crazy, stuff, what are the main ones?
Yeah, so the best thing I can say just to make sure it's covering for all nuances is you go on the IRS website and look at tax forms, and they will tell you if you're a W-2, make sure to fill out these forms, and if you're a 1099, make sure to fill out these forms. Um, and I like to keep it that way just because I'm more versed in New York State specific because
Yeah,
that's where
yeah,
I live,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
might be slightly different in other
yeah.
states. So as long as you check that website,
Okay.
they'll
And that's
inform you. And also,
irs.gov, right? irs.gov.
yes, irs.gov, and they have a section for tax forms. And it's actually, I find, a pretty user-friendly section.
Okay.
So if you go on, they'll tell you, fill out this form, if this is, W-2, fill out this form for 1099.
The next thing that's been brought up that many people have asked, you and I had talked before. Many folks have been asking me this question because it's been coming up. That is tax extensions. And there was an email that went out a while back for us, a bunch of us who kept saying they were encouraging us to file for tax extensions because they were busy or something in the office. It's like just go ahead and file for them now. And can you explain what a tax extension is and kind of what does that mean?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked because there's a huge misconception that can actually get people in
Okay.
trouble.
Okay.
So what you want to remember is there's filing taxes and there's paying taxes. And so filing an extension does not automatically mean you pay your taxes late. You actually still have to pay on time. And so the biggest mistake people make is thinking, oh, I have an extension, but so I don't have to pay. And then you might incur their late fees and their interest fees, and you owe more money. And so you want to avoid that. So the key with an extension is it's really a matter of paperwork. So the benefit is if you need more time to get your stuff organized because you can create more of a hassle and potentially even um, financial penalties by if you file incorrectly or you might end up realizing you owe a little bit more or pay more than you need to. And so making sure you have your documents all organized on time helps you if you have an extension. And as we're coming up to April 18th, which is the due date, if you feel unprepared, definitely file that extension. It's pretty much automatically accepted. And I think the government is probably asking because they are backed up and could use more time in, looking at everything. But you want to make sure, though, that you're still paying. So if you're a W-2, you're probably pretty covered because your taxes have been taken out. And if you're a 1099 and have not been paying any taxes along the way, you definitely want to do some kind of estimate. And you're best off going to like H&R Block or your bank or speaking with a tax professional to help you, pay as much as you can, to at least avoid a penalty of underpayment or no payment.
Thanks for I learned a couple
Yes.
things there, so thanks for saying that. I didn't know that. Did not know that.
Yeah. So many people don't, and it can get you into so much trouble. I mean, I feel like logically an extension to me does feel like, oh, I can pay
Yeah,
later,
right,
but
right, yeah.
it doesn't work that way. So
Well,
it's
the thing is
important to
also,
know.
I guess if they catch anything, they'll give you money. They'll do returns. I remember a couple of times they audited a couple of my things. They're like, oh, we took much money, or we. I mean, that can always be rectified too, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that too.
And you're not always going to get a penalty, like you don't want to overthink, oh, maybe let me make sure I'm paying every cent that I need to, because as long as it's within the range of what's expected,
Okay,
they'll just either say, hey, you owe a little more, or here's your refund.
that's good to know.
Yeah,
I didn't know that either. That's good to know. Okay, that's
yeah.
good.
And that's something to also keep in mind. Your refund will most likely get delayed if you file an extension. So I think it's more important to make sure your paperwork's in order. But if you know you're getting a refund and you really need that money, getting it in on time maybe is more the
Well,
way to
how
go.
early? How early is too early? Also, on the opposite side of that, is there ever too early to file? I mean, like
Um,
starting from January 1st, like starting the New Year clicks over. You got your W, you got your stuff already by the 17th of January. Just say 17th of January. Is that too early or is there no too early?
I don't think there's too early, but there's also no rush. There's not really such a benefit of getting it in earlier.
Okay.
I know my accountant personally always, likes to wait closer to the deadline just to make sure we have everything covered and didn't miss things. because also you sometimes get mail from, let's say you have an investment or
Oh
your
yeah.
IRA or whatever, and sometimes those things are a little delayed and you might not have thought to go on your portal and already print it out. So there's not, I don't personally feel like there's such a benefit of early, but there's also not necessarily a huge downside if it's just like you're organized and you want to just get it off your plate. And the benefit, I guess, of early though is if you are working with a tax professional, they're a little less rushed and fees might be a little cheaper at that time. Um, but it's there's no real clear right or wrong in that sense.
Okay, that's good. So this year, what are the dates and deadlines? As April 18th is the regular deadline, right?
Yes, April 18th. And if you file for an extension, it gives you the automatic 6 months, which would put you to October 18th.
Okay. And that's till midnight, right? That's till like 11:59 p.m. on one of those
Yes,
times you can do it. Because I know people
yes.
who run it. It's always famous here in LA. There's this one UPS place, UPS post office by LAX airport. I live over here by LAX, and every year the news is always there at 11:55, and folks are running in trying to get it postmarked or whatever by then. I always laugh. So I was always like, that's Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people operate, to the last minute or they need that time. I would recommend trying to get it in by 11 just so you're giving yourself a buffer, but you do have till midnight of your time zone, ultimately.
It's a funny thing out here. It's like I think some folks do it on purpose because they want to get on TV, but I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that funny. But you do want to offer a discount to my listeners slash viewers. And there's a 3 video module handout for $47, of course. At adultingintherealworld.com. I'll put a description, I'll put all that in the description. Using the code adult. But so tell us a little more about that. So what are they getting in those courses, those modules?
Yeah, so it's 3 modules, and each module comes with handouts to help you really stay organized and, be concrete about everything. You can print them out, or they're able to be digitally filled out, or you can just use them for reference, just to have that there visually. And so it goes through all the basics, the things that I wish I knew, and when I was younger, and the things I'm constantly teaching people. So we talk, basically about what it's like to start becoming an independent adult, living alone, dealing with friendships. I feel like the interpersonal is a big one. I remember being out of school for the first time, and it's like, oh, I don't have built-in friends anymore, and now I have to figure out how to interact with people. It's a whole new world.
Yeah.
All stuff money. So we go into more detail about taxes and budgeting and credit cards, bank accounts, all that fun stuff, anything you can think about when you're trying to figure out how to deal with money. And we talk about grocery shopping and cooking and all those skills that really I would have preferred to learn in school rather than algebra and trigonometry, but
Yes. Woo,
didn't
yes.
have control over that.
No, you speaking my language, girl. I'm with you on that one. I'm like, well, I mean, I would say towards the end of my schooling, there was an economics class, but it wasn't so into. We had a cooking class at one point too. They got rid of that, but like that's like life skills. These are life skills. I mean, we're not teaching
Yeah.
life skills. That's why I'm like,
Yeah. Because also when I took economics in school, we had it for one semester, senior year, I believe, maybe junior year. And it wasn't very like life skills. It was a little bit more academic. And it's like most of that stuff, I did not retain that information, nor did it help me. So yeah, life skills is a great way to put it.
Yes, these are life skills. Well, thank you, Alyssa, for your time. Thank you so much for sharing. I'll have you back on the show. Some
Thank
more
you for having me. I
adulting.
really enjoyed.
It's
Yeah.
my pleasure too. Adultingintherealworld.com. Go there. And again, we'll
Yes.
have underneath all this in the description where you can go and click on go over there. So yeah, because adulting is hard, but it's adulting. I mean, we're adults. You gotta do it. And there are 2 things you have to do. You will die one day, you gotta pay taxes. That's the 2 things you got.
Yes.
And budgeting, and
True.
you want to make your life easier. Trust me, you want to make your life as easy as possible. There's other things you got to worry about. You don't have to worry about your finances. That's something that you don't have to worry about. So I agree.
Exactly.
Thank you. I'm James Lott Jr. A lot of helps on all social media platforms, and James Lott Jr. is everywhere, of course. And you guys, I said, I already said the website already, so we got that already, adultingintherealworld.com. And everyone, please, good luck this season with the taxes and your budgeting and your adulting, and we will see you next time.